Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, which is going to be focusing on the benefits of collaborating with industry as part of developing a research career. So I'm just going to run through a couple of slides just to highlight what we're going to be talking about for the next hour, and just for the format of how that's going to work before I introduce the rest of the panel to you. So I'm just going to bring up a couple of slides. So yeah, this is the introduction of what we're going to be doing for the next hour. So we're going to be focusing on the benefits of collaborating with industry as part of developing your research career. So as part of that, you'll be hearing about the opportunities for you to do that and to develop skills and experience of industry collaboration through various different NIHR research training awards and fellowships that we have available, and how you can build working with industry and collaboration and gaining those skills into those awards. You'll also hear some personal experience and advice from NIHR Academy members who've already had experience of working with industry. So sort of tips and advice for how it's worked for them, what the benefits have been to both them and their research. And I think that'll be really invaluable for those of you thinking about how you might want to build this into your own research careers as you develop. We've also got representation from industry as well, from Pfizer and Monica, who I'll introduce in a second, will be talking around why that's important to industry in terms of collaborations with academics. So how the format of today is going to work, there's going to be a few presentations to begin with. And after we've done that, we're going to move into a discussion and Q&A with the panel. I'm just going to stop sharing a second and introduce the panel. So I'm going to ask them all to introduce them as I see them on the screen. So Monica, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself first, please.
Thanks very much, Pete. So my name is Monica Nijher. I'm the Inflammation and Immunology lead for the UK at Pfizer.
Brilliant, thanks, Monica. And then David, I can see you next.
I'm David Lunn. I'm a Senior Programme Manager at NIHR Academy.
Thanks, David. And then Sam.
Hi there, I'm Sam Malins. I'm a clinical psychologist and member of the NIHR Academy.
Thanks, Sam. And then finally, Waljit.
Hi, everyone. I'm Waljit Dhillo, NIHR Research Professor and Endocrinologist at Imperial.
Brilliant, thanks. Also, we'll be hearing from everybody shortly. I'm just going to start very briefly with one further slide, just as a way of background to this. So I'm just going to share my screen again. So this really just to sort of as a bit of background, just to highlight why is this important? Why is NIHR highlighting industry collaboration as something for you to be thinking about in terms of your research and your career development? And the big one really is actually we're looking to accelerate research evidence into practice. And I think it's something we all, both as academics, as industry, as us at the NIHR who are funding research, we obviously want to see the evidence that our funding generates to be turned into benefits for patients and the public as quickly as it possibly can, whether that's through new interventions, new devices, drugs, treatments, etc. And to allow that to happen, quite often needs industry collaboration. And I think we've seen, the perfect recent case example of the development of the vaccines for COVID in the time that they have been done is a great example of actually how collaboration between industry and academia can really accelerate how quickly say research evidence can get into practice. And for us at the academy, obviously we're thinking very much around people's research careers and the types of skills that people need to be able to develop and become future research leaders, to allow people to sort of confidently work at that interface between say the NHS and care system, academia and industry. We really want to give people the skills and experience that they need to be comfortable doing that. So people who can move between the three areas can talk the language between the three areas and really understand what it means to collaborate with industry and to understand the different sort of requirements between all three areas. So yeah, so ultimately we're doing this because we want to see, say, treatments go into a position which they can be accessed by patients and the public as quickly as possible. So it very much is along the main aims of and mission of NIHR to improve the health and wealth of the nation. So it's a really important area. So I'm going to hand over to David to start with, and he's going to give a few slides just to go through what the current opportunities we have through the NIHR Academy, through our various different fellowships and research training schemes, and thinking about how you can build collaborations and entrepreneurship skills and experience of working with industry into those awards. So I'll stop sharing my slides and hand over to you, David.
Yes, I'm David Lunn. I'm a senior program manager at the NIHR Academy. I look after a number of schemes, including the Advanced Fellowship and the Development Skills Enhancement Award. So I just thought I'd start with just showing you the different fellowships that we offer at the NIHR Academy. We offer schemes and fellowships at all the range of academic levels, from pre-doctoral all the way through to research professorship for chairs. And I'll pick out a certain number of the fellowships that we offer, and in particular what we offer industry collaborations within. So just this slide is just going to go over the NIHR Academy and what opportunities we offer just in general. So we have three sort of main routes for industry collaborations. So first is the co-funded fellowships, and this is where the fellowships are researcher-led collaborations. And what we're looking for within these is that there's a co-funding between 25% and 50% from an industry collaborator. And what this gives the applicant an advantage of is in the situation at interview where the application's been deemed fundable, but there's a number of fundable applications is more than the budget allows to be funded, these applications will be given priorities. So it's not only important for industry collaboration, it also gives you some advantage in that scenario as well. We also have a number of partnership fellowships. So these are more formal collaborations within our NIHR Academy and with partners. So these partners might be from industry or charity. And this is where the partners are offering 50% or less of a fellowship to joint fund. And then finally, we have a number of placement opportunities as well. And these are part of the Development Skills Enhancement Award, where we have a number of industry collaborators who've put forward, I guess, like a one-page summary of what people could do if they go and work with them for the year of that they would be awarded a Development Skills Enhancement Award. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. And more specifically, the current opportunities that we offer are as part of the advanced and doctoral fellowships. So again, as I previously mentioned, we have the co-funded fellowships. So these are researcher-led collaborations, but we've also got a number of partnership fellowships with Pfizer, and you'll hear probably more about it from Monica here, who's going to present next. But specifically within the NHR Academy, we offer a doctoral fellowship, a partnership fellowship, looking at chronic pain, and then at the advanced fellowship, so the postdoctoral level, we have a number of fellowships looking at an area including dermatitis, alopecia, and psoriasis. And this is something we're looking to expand in the NIHR Academy, so expand on the number of industry collaborators we have. Finally, looking at the other current opportunity is looking at the Development Skills Enhancement Award. So this is a training award for Academy members. It's up to a maximum of a year. Sam, who you'll hear from later, who's as part of the panel, actually is a holder of a Development Skills Enhancement Award. And what we're trying to do with this award is increase the number of people with skills and training in entrepreneurship or experience of working with a small media enterprise or an industry partner. We have a number of specific placement opportunities with the companies that you can see below, but that isn't limited to this. We're also able to offer sort of researcher-led partnership opportunities or collaborations in which the applicant holder can go and spend time with an industry partner.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, David. So that was just a quick overview of the various different fellowships that we have available through NIHR Academy, where you can build in industry collaboration as part of those. And say, as David said, you'll be hearing from Sam, who's had a Development and Skills Enhancement Award, in just a second. But first, I'm going to invite Monica to present a few slides from the industry perspective. So as Monica said at the beginning, she worked with Pfizer, who we're working closely with on some jointly funded fellowships, which David just highlighted, and it'd be interesting to hear her perspective. So over to you, Monica.
Thanks very much, Peter. Hopefully you can see my slides okay.
Yeah, they look good.
Thank you. So it's a real pleasure to be here today. So thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm here to really talk about how we can successfully partner across industry and academia, and think about how we can use progressive initiatives across both parties, like our work with the NIHR, to really reach our ultimate joint aim, which is improving patient outcomes. So before I move on to these collaborations, I just wanted to give a sense of how important the UK region is to Pfizer, especially when it comes to fostering good scientific talent and working together to drive innovation in a clinical setting. We have in fact been working with the NHS since 1952, and now in 2020, over 65 years later, we supply over 150 medicines and vaccines to the NHS across a number of different therapeutic areas. In the last 5 years, we've spent more than £1.2 billion supporting UK research and development to develop the medicines and vaccines of the future. And we have over 100 collaborations and strategic alliances with external partners here in the UK. Our ambition is that together as scientists, academics, clinicians, and industry partners, we're all working together to pool our unique perspectives to deliver world-leading scientific discoveries. So I've mentioned our collaborative partnerships, and you can see on the slide here that these range across a variety of different groups, including academic partnerships, partnerships with registries, scientific societies, and patient organizations, to name just a few. We also, in addition to this, have independent grant application programs across all our therapeutic areas in Pfizer. I've got the name of the inflammation and immunology one shown here, which is Aspire, but they do range across all our therapeutic areas of interest. And these are really for independent grant programs. They involve a publicly posted request for proposals, which detail the specific area of interest for the grant, including timelines for review and approval. We often do use an external review panel, which normally is composed of international clinical academics, to make the actual grant decisions. So I just wanted to highlight the different ways that you can actually work with industry. We've also been working with the NIHR now for several years over a number of different areas, and I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about 3 of these examples, just to show you the breadth of collaboration that does occur with industry and the NIHR. So the first example I wanted to touch on is Pfizer's INSPIRE program. That stands for Investigator Network Site Partnership and Infrastructure for Research Excellence. So it's not a short title there, but essentially the ambition is to really build and maintain long-term relationships with a network of sites which are identified as strategic and highly productive clinical trial sites that are medically relevant to Pfizer. This is a global program, and I'm pleased to say that INSPIRE launched in the UK in 2012. For the sites to actually be considered, there's a very strict criteria that they must reach, such as running trials to the highest standard, ensuring high quality staff and resources, and they must have expertise in areas related to Pfizer's R&D pipeline. The second example is the collaboration that we have on the NIHR on patient centricity in clinical trials. So the Pfizer UK clinical trial process looked at a new project which saw Pfizer clinical trial protocols go through a bespoke NIHR service for patient input into the protocol design service. And we've had some specific examples in inflammation and immunology, in atopic dermatitis, and also in ulcerative colitis, where we've had patient input into the actual protocol design. And we found that involving patients at such an early stage leads to better studies which are better accepted and therefore hopefully better run and potentially have better outcomes for patients. And so now throughout Pfizer, all of our studies need to have some level of patient engagement into the protocol and study documents in order to achieve approval to procedure execution. And we're planning to use the NIHR service again to help meet those requirements. The third example is our NIHR Pfizer fellowships, which David touched on. And of course, this is a collaboration that I'm particularly proud of. And in April, we supported the Last year, we supported the NIHR to launch the joint doctoral and advanced fellowship programs. And these, as David mentioned, are across a variety of areas, including chronic pain for the doctoral fellowship and the advanced fellowship in alopecia areata, chronic atopic dermatitis, vitiligo, and psoriasis. This currently is the only joint fellowship between the NIHR and industry, although of course I know that the NIHR is keen to expand here. And I think it really highlights again how the breadth of collaboration between industry and clinical academia can really benefit research in the UK and ultimately patients in the UK, hoping to drive innovation and support breakthroughs for the benefit of all patients. We've focused these fellowships in these specific areas as we've identified them as areas of unmet need within our therapeutic areas, which is the current choice. We may potentially widen the scope in the future, but we're obviously identify these as key areas of interest. I think the really exciting part of the fellowship is that we're supporting individuals who are on a trajectory to become the future leaders in research. And it's exciting to really be part of that fostering of talent for science in the UK. I'm really excited that by the end of this year, hopefully we should have the first cohort of selected candidates and they'll receive their joint Pfizer and NIHR fellowships. So just in summary and to end, you can see that from this brief overview, just with these 3 examples of projects, that there's a huge amount to be gained across different research areas and for all parties involved, being academics, clinicians, researchers, and ultimately patients by working collaboratively. We've got a very close, strong relationship with the NIHR across a number of strategic areas, and I hope we'll continue to work very closely together on more in the future. So I hope this has given you a good sense of what we can actually achieve together through NIHR and industry partnerships. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Monica. That was really great to hear, and I think really shows the importance of collaboration between academia and industry, and it's good to hear it from both sides. So it was fantastic to hear from the industry perspective on that. We're going to go into our panel discussion, which will sort of merge into a Q&A with questions that you send in, and we've had ones come in already, so that's fantastic. So I encourage you to keep putting in questions as we go through this. Before we actually start answering questions, I'm actually going to invite Sam and Waljit just to give a bit of a brief intro and background in terms of their experience, which I think will be very useful for you to hear. So I'm going to start off with Sam, if that's okay. Sam, I'll over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Pete. Hi there, I'm Sam Malins. So I'm a clinical psychologist and I work at kind of the crossover between physical and mental health care, people who have long-term physical health problems, but also mental health comorbidities. And I guess I'm quite kind of early on in the process of collaborating with industry, but it's been really helpful. So I'm glad to kind of be able to share this, and please do ask any questions that might help kind of help you with your journey. So in terms of clinical practice, I work largely in cancer care, but the research that I do and have done has focused on optimizing and enhancing psychological therapies, usually using digital technology to make that happen. So started off maybe 5 or 6 years ago, focused on using video conferencing to increase the accessibility and reach of psychological therapies, which has turned out to be quite helpful for what's going on right now. And most recently, at the moment, I'm working on, as David said, development and skills enhancement NIHR award in collaboration with a digital technology industry called Simple Shared Healthcare, who produce a smart messaging tool called Florence, which is commissioned in a number of NHS trusts. And we're basically using it to reduce dropout and to reduce relapse after psychological therapies. I think it's probably worth saying that I've kind of stumbled into this. It wasn't like an initially, although I'm much more purposeful now, it wasn't initially that way. I was at a conference talking about video conferencing being a helpful way of helping mental health And at the same conference, there was someone from Simple talking about how this kind of smart messaging could be used. It was largely used at that point to monitor blood pressure remotely, to control diabetes, and just ended up in a conversation. And I quite quickly realized that what I knew about how language could help people become more motivated could easily be adapted to this technology in a way that would help people who either had long-term health, physical health problems or mental health problems to manage their condition better. And so we work in collaboration with a number of clinicians, a couple of researchers, and a couple of patient advisors. We developed some, alongside the industry team, we developed a couple of protocols to do just that, to make what I knew was going to be really helpful was that people were hearing their own advice rather than just a kind of abstract messaging that was related to their own experience. And we were able to do a couple of proof of concept studies attached to a clinical trial, and one in routine practice. And basically we were able to reduce dropout from around 33% to about 7%. And in terms of long-term health, we were able to kind of improve health by about 25% at 1 year follow-up. And I was kind of personally quite surprised that it could have that big an effect. I wasn't necessarily as hopeful as that it can have that big an impact. And I think for me particularly, I hadn't realized how working closely with industry opened my eyes to ways of thinking around the problem that I definitely couldn't have done just on my own as a researcher or a clinician. And I think I had also underestimated how what I might be able to contribute that the guys in the industry didn't have access to. So I think that kind of links in with my kind of 3 takeaways of what I've learned so far. It's definitely a journey for me still. Is firstly, don't underestimate how valuable the collaboration can be, both for you and for the industry. I guess from my point of view, I didn't realize how little access they had to people who had kind of psychological health related skills. And I certainly didn't understand how things got commissioned, the implementation piece of it as well. Secondly, I think don't go it alone. I think I've been massively helped by working and being kind of mentored by a senior clinical academic who was much more well-versed in working with industry in a healthy and helpful way. And I guess my third point was probably the key take home that helped me to start it up was setting out things in a way that's really clear at the start, what your role is, so that you can address something that someone's already asked about, academic independence, what the key outcomes are for both of you and jointly. So that's just a little bit about my experience, and I'm going to hand over to Professor Waljit Dhillo now.
Great, thanks, Sam. Okay, and is everybody okay with my slides? Great. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a very short synopsis of a study I was involved with, and started with really the science, and then very quickly moved into translation with partnership with industry, as you can see at the top there, with a number of partners and MRC and NIHR funding the work. So menopausal flushing, you will all be aware, obviously an unmet clinical need. All women will go through the menopause, 70% will experience hot flushes, and they can last actually for 7 to 10 years. And obviously HRT therapy works very well, but there's side effects. And other than that, really, we're still at the hocus pocus end of science with no science backing anything else. And so there's an unmet clinical need of women who can't take HRT for various reasons you'll be familiar with. And we don't really understand the mechanisms behind the menopausal flushing, and that's why there's been no breakthroughs in treatment. One of the things that came up during my research, I won't go into all the details, was this hormone called neurokinin B. And basically, it's kind of a very long story short. What was shown about 20 years ago, in fact, by Naomi Rance in the States, was in the brains of postmenopausal women, there was hypertrophy of neurons in the brain that expressed NKB, and NKB was high. And I'm not going to go through her animal data, both in monkeys and rodents, but that confirmed that neurokinin B expression in the brain was high in menopausal states. So we thought we were very interested in this bit of science, and so we did the first human infusion study of neurokinin B itself to look for induction of hot flushes in premenopausal women to see they obviously are not having menopausal flushes, but could we induce them by infusing neurokinin B? And we published this paper back in 2016 showing that indeed we could. So that led to this hypothesis, which was increased neurokinin B signaling is potentially causing menopausal flushing as a new mechanism. And so if we could attenuate it by giving an oral antagonist to NKB, and NKB acts as the NK3 receptor, then you could have a new therapy. And of course, as usual, we don't really think this is going to work in humans. Animal studies don't necessarily translate to humans, but there was enough scientific evidence to suggest that this might be the case and formed part of my research professorship application. So what did I do? So the first thing I did, and this addresses one of the questions in the chat, was look round and look for an oral NK3 receptor antagonist. Rather than developing one which might take 10 years, were there any around that industry had already made? And in fact, they'd been made and tested by industry in humans for schizophrenia, in fact, and shown not to work. So these were shelved compounds sitting on various drug company shelves. And so back in April 2014, I emailed Mene Pangalos, who wasn't knighted at that point, but was last year. And he emailed me back and said, yes, we've got a compound sitting on our shelf, but we're not interested in that area. And MRC had a scheme where they would fund investigators to use drugs sitting on drug company shelves in a new indication. And so we moved forward with AstraZeneca in a grant application to the MRC, and I was funded by NIHR for my fellowship at this point. That was in July. By February the next year, we were funded. The first patient was recruited the following year. And in January 2017, we'd completed the study. So going back to Pete's point, in terms of speed, we went from hypothesis to first study in humans in 3 years, which is pretty quick. So these were the data. This is the only data I'm going to show you. So we had a 45% reduction in menopausal flushing above placebo, and that was published in the Lancet about a couple of years ago. Moving forward, 3 companies are in the race now. The day we published this paper, the company who were our rivals didn't publish their paper. They published a couple of years later, but their company sold for $850 million. So they were doing something slightly different. So the hope is with 2 companies moving forward in the field, within the next 3 years, we will have a new therapy for menopausal flushing worldwide, which is pretty cool. So it goes back to this point, I think. It isn't easy necessarily, and you have to develop the partnerships, but that's the critical thing really, is if you've got academics working with industry with a common goal, then actually you can achieve things quite quickly.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Waljit, and thanks, Sam, as well, for your sort of background and story of where you've come from so far in terms of industry working. So we've got half an hour for the rest of this webinar to think about the questions that have been coming in from you guys. So I encourage you again to submit some more questions as we're going through this. We'll try and get through as many of these as possible. I'm just going to start off with a more sort of, I suppose, general point from me as opposed to the questions that have come in so far, and it's probably one for Sam and Waljit. I think you both sort of highlighted there the importance and the benefits that your industry collaborations have given your research, but I just wanted to get your thoughts in terms of your own sort of career development as well. What additional sort of experience, skills do you think it's given you in that regard, which has helped your career development?
Sam, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm picking up on your point actually. Well, I would say, Pete, that definitely this kind of idea of accelerating things that I think otherwise would have been slower has definitely been my experience. And I guess for me personally, as a clinical psychologist, it's quite unusual, this kind of relationship with industry, and I think it makes me think differently about how to move ideas forward. in that now I would think of an industry collaboration as a way to move things forward. And I think, like I was saying in what I was talking about, that view on implementation from the start, and that view on how could this work in practice, has been a really helpful learning curve for me personally. I don't think I was naturally that way inclined. And I think I was expecting it to be a bit more like, you know, grinding up, pushing a heavy stone uphill. I wasn't expecting the collaboration to be that the guys in industry would be, you know, completely on the same page of trying to move things forward as quickly as possible in ways that I wouldn't have been able to do on my own as either a clinician or as an academic.
Yeah, no, brilliant.
Yeah, so I think I'd share Sam's comments. So I think what I'd say is it does help you think about your research in a slightly different way. So the big thing for me would be if I can retire in 15 years or so and say I actually did something for patients, that would be, you know, terrific. So the only way that you're really going to do that is by partnering with industry. So that Lancet paper we've published, we've stepped back. They're now doing the phase 2 and 3 studies. They're 10, 20, 30 million pound studies, you know, that have to go through the safety. That's, you know, going to come and hopefully we'll have a treatment. Now, you know, had we not done that initial study trying to develop an oral antagonist for human use, you're talking 10 years, get the money, et cetera, et cetera. So even if there isn't, you know, a compound out there, working with industry, there's another hormone I'm working on as well, and there's 2 companies we're working with. Now, they might have the they might have the chemical know-how, but you've got the scientific know-how and know the field. So, you know, that neurokinin B we picked up on very early as a potential signal because we were able to do that investigator study. But you need the partnership to move things forward. And I'd agree with Sam, actually, if you're working with, there's been a kind of them and us between academia and industry, and actually that divide is changing. And actually, if you want to translate your scientific findings into benefits for patients, then you know, as Sam's doing, whatever you're doing, technology, or whether you're doing drugs or any kind of therapy, you're going to need to partner with somebody who can move it forward to the clinic. And I think it does focus your mind to be able to say, I've consulted for some companies as well, and they are very absolute about where they need to be. So for the menopause compound, there's other really interesting endocrine things that I could use it in, and the companies are absolutely not interested in that area at the moment. They need to get it to market. Now, I can understand that, seeing it when you're working with them, because if there's a side effect, then that whole drug will essentially die and never come to market. So it kind of gives you a more realistic, you know, kind of thought process of when you think about your research and how you're going to get it to patients.
Yeah,
can I just jump something on the end of that, which really agrees with what you're saying, Waljit, but translating that into like a digital tech thing that I guess I've seen in the short period I've been around is that often researchers will think, oh, well, what I need to do is develop, and it's the equivalent of what you're saying about going from the chemistry basic rather than looking at what's out there. Lots of people will think, oh, I need to develop an app. I need to go. I think people, including me, would have been me, underestimate how long that takes to do that well and to make it attractive for people. Why wouldn't you look at who's already doing that, who's already done that legwork, to work with them rather than trying to set yourself back quite a long time to produce something useful quicker.
Yeah, brilliant. No, thanks both. This sort of topic around you know, acceleration and timeframes actually relates to one of the questions that we had in from one of the participants. So it's actually more of a comment really, which came under the poll that we did around potential barriers. And they've highlighted the fact that timescales can be quite different between industry and academia in terms of working at different paces, and this can sometimes cause difficulty in getting things off the ground. So I guess from your perspective, and Monica as well from an industry side, what would your sort of response be to that in terms of the different timeframes and how that might cause difficulties getting things going?
Yeah, I think you know, building on the previous point and this point, I think it really speaks to having a clear partnership and discussion from the outset with regards to goals and objectives from all parties, and I think Sam mentioned that as well. But really, I think, you know, what I think everyone's highlighted today is the fact that the cognitive diversity by working together from different sectors really allows us to harness each other's skills.
Yeah.
And really, and therefore really drive innovation. Yes, there may well be situations where timelines are, expectations are different, and they may be very regulated timelines that we have in clinical development and some projects within industry. However, I think a lot of that can be discussed from the outset, and as long as both parties are aware, hopefully that shouldn't be shouldn't deter anyone. I think that's something that you can work together as partners to overcome.
Yeah, brilliant. No, thank you.
If I can just chip in, Pete. I
yeah,
think,
absolutely.
I think all of university admin and NHS admin is not great, put it that way. And then, so it's really chivying people along. So if you've got drive, enthusiasm, and you want to make things happen, you can, but you just need to gently chase people to make sure the contracts happen. Because once the contracts happen, things can move very quickly.
Yeah, no, good point. I'm just going to go to a couple more questions that have come in, so thank you very much for these. Someone has asked, I was wondering if you have any tips on how to find academic groups that are already working in collaboration with industry that might be good potential hosts for postdoctoral fellowship. So I don't know if Waljit, you want to start answering that one?
Yeah, I mean, what I've found is, as I've increasingly age, is actually just reach out to the right person. Doesn't matter where they are. If they're interested in what you're doing, they will email you back. And that includes just an email randomly out of the blue, finding Menno Pangalos's email, and you replied back within 12 hours and said, yes, we'd be interested in working with you. Here's the right person. So I think we're a bit too stiff upper lip, which is the right thing to do, but not in this setting of just reaching out. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? It doesn't even cost you a postage stamp, does it? Email somebody, or as Sam says, speak to people at meetings. You'll often have people interested in what you're doing at a meeting. And actually, I usually arrange to meet people, over a coffee or whatever, at a meeting face to face, and you can brainstorm and move things along. And if the will is there, then all of the other stuff is kind of detail and can happen, reasonably quickly, even though it's a bit dull.
Yeah, I guess I would totally agree with that. That was kind of what I was alluding to. My views kind of changed now. I stumbled into this, but I think more purposefully about it now, in that, like, probably in the last year, maybe about half a dozen digital tech industries have got into either direct with me or through Richard Morris, who's kind of mentored me. And I used to think, oh, that's not going to be worth my time, or it's almost always been worth like a 20-30 minute chat about it as a start of a 10, and I pretty much never leave with nothing. Even if I think this isn't for now or it's not for me, it sharpens my thinking. You know what I mean? It makes me think differently, because they'll be coming out, because it's new. It gets me thinking in a different way, and I think that idea of just reaching out, just kind of getting over yourself and just asking, even if it's a bit speculative. I think again, just from my experience, I think I'd thought that happened all the time, and I don't think it does. I think it's less common than you'd imagine that, an NIHR academic reaches out to industry and says, hey, I was thinking we could collaborate on this, so it's worth a punt.
And I'd just add to that, that's in terms of any research that you do, reach out to the best group in the world at the expertise you need. It goes back to Sam's point. If somebody's the superstar at apps, don't try and beat that race, join them. So, whether it's industry or whether it's another research group who's got the expertise you need for your big paper, just reach out. The worst they can say is no. And actually, if they know your work, they'll probably say yes. So,
yeah, brilliant. I suppose, Monica, anything from your side in terms of sort of these sort of approaches from academia or industry to you or other companies, commercial partners, etc. Just to get your thoughts on that.
I would echo really Waljit and Sam's point about reaching out and having those discussions, either on an email or when we were able to meet face to face. Often at conferences is a good chance to meet and discuss points. But yes, having that conversation and dialogue. And I feel, Sam, you made a great point there about understanding that a conversation can lead to many other possibilities. So your original, perhaps your original conversation you may not have reached that specific goal, but there may potentially be a number of other spin-offs. For specific information in terms of industry information, you know, all the companies, including Pfizer, do of course host on their websites information about UK partnerships. So that could be a source just to highlight, because I can see a few questions coming in with regards to those points, just to highlight that, you know, for a direct source of information, you can start there, but don't stop there. You know, carry on, reach out, connect with people, be it via email or LinkedIn or a telephone call or a face-to-face chat when we can have those conversations again, but do reach out.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think one thing to highlight from NIHR side is we're looking to potentially add some further sources of information and sort of direct people to different organisations. If you are looking to sort of make that first step or connection with a commercial partner or as part of a fellowship or part of a funding application, we're looking at sort of different ways that we could provide that information to you on the NIHR website. So keep an eye on that, and we'll hopefully some more sort of useful links and things will be going on there in due course. So I'm just going to go back to the questions. So another one's come in around, you know, we've heard some really great examples about collaboration between academia and industry. What can NIHR do to further to get the message out there that it's okay to involve and collaborate with industry and counter some of those negative views? So, I mean, in terms of negative views, I think we probably all heard them in sort of big bad pharma companies and all those sort of views which actually aren't true, but they often sort of remain and can potentially put some people off. So it's certainly something we as NIHR want to do. Hence, you know, this webinar today is a good way of doing that and actually showing actually that everybody, academia and industry is really keen on working together on this. But again, from the panel, any thoughts on this and what else we could do to actually show that this is a really good thing to do and encourage people to think about collaboration?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, I think MRC and NIHR are certainly got much more of a remit and statement now with specific schemes. So I think that helps because so out the project I showed, MRC have got a very specific scheme where they will fund, you know, drugs that drug companies have got on their shelf, and they will fund the research bit of it because that won't get done. So that's a specific scheme. And there's I won't go into the boring details, but there's a MICA form you complete. So there's a, you know, kind of an agreement before you start with the company, and those kind of things I think make it easier. And certainly I think from a funder's point of view, highlighting those specific schemes and successes that have come through would probably help. But I think in academia generally, there's much more of a realization that actually it's crazy not to be working together, because it's, you know, that's how you get to the patient benefit quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there is sort of, you know, this increasing drive, including initiatives like the IMI initiative as well, which is Pfizer is a part of, which is really trying to drive that collaboration. And again, looking at the end goal, which is patient benefit, which, you know, all parties are trying to aim for. So if we hold that in mind, that the end goal is the same, and try and build on that to try and hopefully dispel some of the negative perceptions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just to highlight, we had our an annual NIHR conference, and back in 2019, the NIHR Academy conference had a focus on industry and entrepreneurship. And interestingly, we did a poll at both the beginning and end of this conference, sort of asking the audience's thoughts of industry collaboration in just one word. And right at the beginning, that was the first thing we did on day one. And I think a lot of the one-word answers did actually were sort of the negative things that you might think of if you weren't necessarily involved in this. But then we spent the the conference looking at exploring this in more detail, thinking about the opportunities available, introducing people who have experience of working with industry, showing the benefits, etc., etc. And actually, it completely changed when we re-asked that question again at the end of the conference. It was all much more positive. People were very much looking to say, actually, how can I do this? What sort of more information would I need to get involved in working with industry? So you could see, even with the space of a couple of days, actually, people were very, very much willing to think about this and have their eyes open to actually the opportunities that are available, which was really encouraging to see. So I think case studies are really important with this. I think we've had some really good examples today. So certainly us as NIHR want to do as much as we can to sort of promote those out there and so people can actually see the benefits, because I think case studies are really powerful in this regard.
I think as well, I'd just throw in that some of the NIHR infrastructure can be really, has for me personally been really helpful here. And so I guess if people are on this call who are from industry, I think that would be the cold call if you were thinking about it, because I guess from my point of view, the MindTech MedTech Mental Health Cooperative, which is NIHR funded, hosted in Nottingham, BRC, were really helpful for me in that they had templates for these kind of agreements. They had a kind of track record of this kind of working, and when it's worked well, it was a really useful resource to be able to link in with existing NIHR infrastructure to kind of guide me on what, was a pretty unusual part. There wasn't a lot of people doing this kind of thing.
Brilliant, thanks, Sam. I think that's started to answer actually one of the other questions that's come in, which is, where is the best place to start out and find out more information about industry collaboration? I think it puts a lot of people off not knowing how or where to start. So thoughts on the panel on that?
I think it's the connections. That's where it works well. Is Monica kind of mentioned meetings. We haven't had any for a year, which is not helpful, because somebody will see your work. And I mean, we've got a partnership we're just developing now with the States, because we've developed a new way of sensing hormones, and they picked up on our paper that we published in Nature Communications a year or two ago. And actually that would just, we've got another grant and it's slowly moving along. They're talking about 9 months trying to make a device and get it into patients. It's transformative, but it comes from, I think, those the conversations that you have, or making a connection with the relevant person. That there's no point in the area that I showed the example for. If the company hasn't got a compound, there's kind of no point in going to them. But so do a bit of homework, find out who is the company that has got your. So if you're into skin, go and see Pfizer and apply for this fellowship. I mean, it's so a bit of homework to find out which is the right company and what they do. Is really important, because that different companies will have their focuses, and there's 2 companies I'm working with in the States at the moment that have got a specific hormonal interest. That's their beef. So I'm massively interested in working with them for that reason. Whereas so I think a lot of it is find out what you want to do, and then find out who the relevant person is and drop them an email, because if they're the right person, they'll be jumping to talk to you because they'll be interested.
Yeah, I think because I suppose in the kind of digital health piece digital mental health piece that I'm kind of working in, I think I found it hard to know who are the main players here, because it's kind of like often very new, no real track record, and the really, really big players feel like they're kind of a bit at arm's length sometimes. And so I think I've still had like a few of those conversations anyway. So for example, there was a company who theirs was like a digital therapy kind of system, but the bit that that was kind of their kind of view of what was really valuable, and it is really valuable. But the thing I was really interested in was the algorithms they had running in the background that was self-updating, which isn't commonly used. And so I guess I was thinking, this could be helpful further down the line in terms of what I'm doing. And they were kind of realizing, oh, right, we didn't think about that bit as like a really key piece that has application elsewhere. So I think there is definitely, it's still worth that kind of like little conversation, even if you're not fully sure who's the right person, because it can guide you to the right person just along the way. But I mean, I've completely taken what you've said there, Waljit, of go for the person who is the world leader. They can always say no. I think that's really good advice.
Brilliant, thank you. And I should also, just to re-emphasize some of the things that David highlighted in his slides at the beginning, there are specific examples actually of where we've got, you know, obviously the Pfizer one is a big one, and then also within the Development and Skills Enhancement Award, some specific companies within that who are actually interested in working with applicants as part of putting in an application. So if they are in your areas of interest, that's a bit of a highlight of companies who are keen to work with people. So there's more information there. Right, we've got a couple of minutes left, so hopefully time to get through just a couple more questions. So there's a specific question come in about someone who's looking to introduce a manufactured robot into clinical practice, so that it sounds like in surgery. I want to ensure this is done safely and effectively. How can I engage with NIHR and the industry partners to do this, and what is the process / pathway? So if I just start briefly on this, then others feel free to chip in. I mean, partly it'll probably come down to who is potentially looking to fund this. I mean, if this is the kind of thing that's going to be funded by the industry partner, then we can certainly, as an NIHR, link you to the right bits of the organisation to conduct research, the research required within the NHS. So, for example, the Clinical Research Network supports studies which are industry funded, industry sponsored to take place within the NHS. If you're looking at more early phase work, then the various bits of the NIHR infrastructure, like biomedical research centres, etc., can be a place to go. And again, the NIHR Office for Clinical Research Infrastructure, or NOCRI, can help direct you to the right place there. So what we can certainly do in terms of follow-up information, we can give you some further links to people to go and speak to, I think, about that particular example. Anyone else got anything they'd want to mention with that particular question? No. Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to move on to see if we've got a couple more questions just coming in at the end. Could we get some more information on how to access templates for contract agreements, please? I think, Sam, you mentioned that, didn't you? The sort of examples that you've had, or templates that you've got hold of.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it was kind of quite specifically within mental health, within the kind of digital sphere, and this was through Mindtech MedTech Mental Health Cooperative. I guess, Waljit, you might know a bit more generally kind of templates for this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, so MRC have got a MICA form. I can't remember what it stands for, MICA. So if you just put into Google MRC and MICA, that just takes you through. It's quite a good form. It's not too long, and it's basically like a initial kind of handshake, if you like, between the company and the applicant. You put that in to say, look, we've had a chat. These are the terms and conditions and a discussion about IPR, because that's obviously important. And this is how we'd work together. And then that doesn't hold up your grant, because the assumption is that then if the grant is awarded, then a full conversation will happen, and the MICA will essentially be extended out. But it gets things going, and a discussion and a handshake, if you like, from the company to say, this is how we'll work together. Because if you don't have that, and then the grant's awarded, and then the company are not committed, then it's bad for both partners, really. So and then NIHR have got standard costings, for example, for industry studies. So within each of the universities, there should be kind of certainly for the funders, there's standard forms, and within each university they'll have your technology transfer as the people to work with, so that you've got your the aspect of IPR covered. I have to say, I haven't made any money out of any of the stuff I've done with industry. Unless you make a brand new hormone or discover it, it's unlikely that you're going to have all the IPR from the beginning. So everybody gets wound up slightly by the IPR, but actually often there isn't any, and a lot of projects won't show the outcome. So I tend not to get too, you need to go through the process, but not get too bogged down with IPR that may not exist, and get going with the research. But obviously protect the IPR, but don't get bogged down with it, would be my advice.
Yeah, and certainly from the NIHR perspective, I think if people are struggling out there with things like agreements or IP issues, certainly do get in touch with your sort of whoever you're working with, your main point of contact at whichever program or grant you're on. Because although we don't necessarily have a standard template which we would expect people to use, we can certainly point people in the right direction. So we don't want you to, as Waljit says, to be slowed down by these things. So get in touch if that is an issue. And the same person has also asked a sort of a related question. I think you partly answered this before, Waljit, around the biggest barrier can often be my slow university at developing and signing contracts, finance, procurement, ethics, which can take 6 months plus, and colleagues have lost industry partnerships as a result of these delays.
So what I would say there is most trusts and universities are now much better than they were. And actually, so one of my other roles is divisional director for research for the trust. And actually, the person who's the head of administration says half of the delays can be due to the PI not sending back a piece of paper or whatever, so you have to be proactive in these things. I mean, nobody wakes up, with a new idea and then dreams of those contracts. They're all painful. To be frank, I just signed them over to my technology transfer because I don't even understand the language. And you're basically trying to protect your IPR, your intellectual property, and make sure your institution's covered. That's up to them, but a gentle chaser would be my advice, and find out where the block is, because it might be that it went to Pete and Pete sent it to David and David didn't know my email address or something. I mean, it's not going to be that simple, but something very minor that I had forgotten to do, and that holds up the whole process because they need the signatures in place. So I'm not saying that they're not slow, and my own institution is not particularly fast, but if you the other thing to do is pick up the phone, find out who it is that you're dealing with on your end, so they can gently chase, because there's usually, I mean, for the project I showed you, there were 3 or 4 partners, and it did take some time, but if you gently push and gently chase and nudge and find where the roadblock is, that can help a lot.
Brilliant, thanks, Waljit. I know we've only got 1 minute to go, so I'm going to try and quickly squeeze in one final question. So this is someone who's in the private sector who has an idea for a product, and they need to carry out some in-depth research in order to do this, and they're just wanting to get a bit more information around how to approach academics and where do I start. And I think a lot of you've covered that already, but I suppose the only other thing I wanted to add on to that is I mentioned NIHR, which is the NIHR Office for Clinical Research Infrastructure, earlier in the Q&A. We can put the information and contact details for NIHR out with the recording of this webinar, but they're certainly well set up to help you there. So we have obviously links into various parts of the different bits of NIHR infrastructure. So if you're a company or a commercial organization looking to conduct research within the NHS or get input from academia, NIHR and the NHR can certainly help make those connections if you haven't been able to do so. We can provide some more information about the best place to do that when we send this out.
Pete, can I just add one comment quickly?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
I would encourage industry to do the same. If Google, the academic who's interested, they'll be biting your hand off if it's their area. So it's a two-way process. Send off an email, they might not reply, or they might write back straight away and say, this is fantastic, this is exactly what I'm working on. And that's certainly when I get an approach from industry for an area that I'm interested in, I'm very happy to work with them if it's something I'm interested in. So
yeah. Brilliant, thanks, Waljit. So that nicely brings us up to, or just past 2 o'clock now, so sorry, we were slightly overrunning. So that brings us to the end. I hope that's been helpful to everybody. I think we've got through the majority of questions. If there is anything that we haven't managed to answer, we will try and answer those individually where we can. So thank you all very much for attending. I hope it's been helpful. And that's it, so thank you all, and bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.